So where we are right now is
No screen.
I lost my share the screen button.
Uh-oh.
Ah, there we go. All right. So what we're going to talk about are snapshots. And remember how the other day I showed you how you could make virtual copies?
Yes.
Well, virtual copies and snapshots are kind of related to each other. So what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you just watch me make a couple snapshots, and then we'll walk through making them together. Okay?
Okay.
So let's say I'm working on this image, and I'm trying to decide, I don't know where I want to go with it, which happens to me a lot. All right. So I'm going to make it a little bit bluer, and I'm going to pull the blacks down a little bit. I'm going to pull the clarity up some. Maybe add some more texture to it. Drop the vibrance a bit. Pull the saturation up some. And okay, so I look at this for a bit and I'm like, I'm not sure that I like this, but I'm not sure I don't. So because I know I'm going to do a lot of what ifs, I'm going to come over here to snapshots, going to click the plus, and it's going to say, give it a name, okay? And because I'm not super creative, I'm going to call this 1. All right, so I create it. Now under snapshots, I see a 1. So now I'm going to come back here, I'm going to hit the reset, and I'm going to take a completely different approach now. I'm going to go black and white on this one. I'm going to pull the shadows way down. I'm going to pull the blacks way down. And I'm going to add in a lot of texture and some clarity. And let's see what dehaze does. Oh, there we go. All right. So I'm thinking that might work. So now I come back over to snapshots. I click the plus. I'm going to give it a name.
2.
Okay.
That was my guess.
Pattern here. Okay. So I'm going to come back to reset. And on this one, I'm going to do something slightly different. I'm going to go black and white, but this time, just because Anita got me thinking about it, is I'm going to do a fake sepia tone or sepia tone. I don't know how to pronounce it. Okay, so I'm going to come over to snapshots. I'm going to create a new snapshot. Anybody want to guess?
3.
3. Here we go. Okay. You can call them anything that you want. Like I could have given these names that were descriptive, like sepia tone. So I'm going to do one more. I'm going to hit the reset, and I'm going to do this one with a lot of contrast in it. So I'm going to pull the contrast slider up, which is not normally the way I do this. I'm going to pull the blacks way down, and I'm going to pull the highlights way up, and I'm going to drop the saturation a bit. Add in a little bit of clarity and some texture. Okay, so this time I'm going to call this one high contrast. And I'm going to create. Okay, so now if I go back and click on any one of these presets or snapshots, it takes me almost as if they were presets.
Wow.
Settings. And you can save them for this image. So for example, one of the things that we do with clients is that we have found that some clients love black and white, some people hate it, like my mom. And so whenever we create a black and white version of a photo to show a client, we also create a color version as well. So we create the 2 versions one of 2 ways. We'll either do a virtual copy and make one color and one black and white, or we'll do a snapshot and we save it. And that way it's not a preset that winds up populating our control panel. Snapshots, the way that they're different is these snapshots are only of this photo. If I go over here to this photo of Emma, there are no snapshots for Emma. I come back to this photo, those 4 snapshots are still there. The snapshots are photo specific. They're like presets in a way, but they're just for this photo.
Wow.
Within the snapshots, can you still do like that side-by-side comparison, or the one with you can do 6 images? You know what I'm
No,
saying?
and that's the downside, is that it's this or that. It's not a let's look at them side by side.
But can you do that with a virtual copy?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so that's a difference too. Virtual copy, you could
Right.
side-by-side comparison. Okay.
And which direction that you go in with these, Ginger, depends a lot on how it is that you work, and your thought process. And the thing is that again, snapshots is a tool that a lot of Lightroom users never touch. Never touch. We tend more frequently to default to virtual copies here, so that we can do side-by-side comparisons with other photos and other versions of the same photo.
Right.
Okay. If
Marco,
you
can you
right
stack
click
these?
on, go ahead.
Sorry. Could you stack all of the different options,
How do you mean stack?
bring them together so they're all layered into one picture, one image?
No.
Okay. Yeah.
If you decide that you want to make a copy of a snapshot or rename it or update the snapshot, just like you can with a preset, you would right click on the snapshot and then you get this little dialog. You have 4 choices. You can copy it, rename it, update it with any changes that you've made, or delete it. How much you use it depends a lot on how you work. Okay, so the history panel. This one is super great because this is a much better way to back up than doing Control-Z. All right. The history panel for a photograph, Lightroom keeps track of every change you've made to a photo since you imported it into the catalog. So if I go back all the way to the bottom of the history channel, I imported this photo into this catalog on April 28th at about noon 30 that day. Okay, that's when it was added to this catalog. And since then, you can see all the different things that I have done to it in chronological order, up until the last thing, which was to create a snapshot called high contrast. I can step back anywhere in time on the history and see what the state of the photo was at that point in the history. I can go all the way back to what did the photo look like it was imported? Well, it looked like that, and then I did a graduated filter. Wow, that's pretty stupid. And I updated the graduated filter. What was I thinking? It's a step-by-step history of everything you've done to the image since it was imported. So long as it's been in the catalog. Now, here's the deal though. If I come back down here to like, I'm gonna come back down to before the snapshots. If I come back to this setting, before I did snapshot 1, and I do something at this point, what happens now is that all of those, it starts over. All of those snapshots are now gone because I went back to a previous history state and started working again. So it deletes everything that occurred after that point, and you've added new stuff on top of it. So if I was to go all the way back in this photograph to the import and went to this graduated filter setting, if I make any changes on the right side of the panel, all of the history state that followed after I add the graduated filter are going to disappear. And that's just what happened. So now the history of this image is I imported it, I added a graduated filter, and then I changed the vibrance. Okay. So be careful when you go back in history. If you want to go look at something, you say, gosh, I kind of like that. This is where snapshots can come in handy. If you go way back in the history of a photo and you're like, yeah, I want to change that and I want to save that, go back, make a snapshot of it. It won't do anything. No, actually that will. Adding the snapshot will get rid of it. So you got to be careful about going back in the history state and making changes, because you got to understand that if you go back in the stack down closer to the import date and make changes, everything after that point where you've just made a change will disappear.
If you go back in the history and you make a virtual copy, will that erase the history from that point on also?
You know, I don't know. But the good news is that as you just see, I hit the Z key and my history state's back. Okay, so you can recover from deleting the history state if you do it accidentally. Well, let's do a quick experiment. I'm gonna make a virtual copy of this photo. And if I come to the history state, what you see now is that this virtual copy has its own history, starting with when it was created. So if I make a bunch of changes to this one, you can see as I make changes, there's more and more events being added to the history state of this photo.
And if you go back to the original, will it still show the original history and not be disrupted by the fact that you did a virtual copy?
Yes, Lightroom
Okay.
will treat these as two separate photographs as far as history goes. Okay, so the history state can be really helpful to figure out what you were doing. Let's say you worked on a photo and then you went on Safari and you come back 6 months later and you're trying to remember something that you did earlier on. The history state is a good way to go back and figure out how you may have processed a photo that you really like. So for the most part, well, actually not for the most part, but that is everything on the left-hand side of the panel of the dialog box. And depending on how you work and the way that you think, which tools out of here you use there's no right and wrong answers. It's if the tool's useful to you for what you're doing and the way that you work and the kind of things that you do, then it can be helpful. So I'll go back to presets for a sec. I have a friend in the lower 48 that does product photography. He has a couple clients and he does all of their photos that they wind up putting in their online catalogs. And so they have developed a style is they want all of their product photos to look identical. So what he does is that he's shooting them in the studio. So he has the standard lighting setup that he uses. And then what he does is he has a preset for their company. And he imports, once he gets their new photos into his catalog, he selects them all, and then he applies the preset for ABC Foods, for all the stuff that he did for them. And that way they always look the same, okay? So for him, presets work for him. He likes them, he uses them a lot. He has a preset for each of his clients. He talks to me about what he does, and it would drive me, I would shoot myself doing that. I mean, he spent all day, every day, like putting jars of baby food, taking 3 pictures of it, taking it out, putting in a watch, taking it out. It's like, okay. But it's paying the bill, so he likes it.
So that's essentially like a corporate style sheet if you were a writer.
Exactly. It's the same idea. Okay, any questions about anything in the right or left panel here in the develop module? All right, so what we're going to talk about next is how we get what we've done out of Photoshop. Now, a lot of folks print at home, and the print module is useful for printing at home if you do that. I stopped doing our own printing. We had a high-end printer and I got rid of it about 7 years ago because it's too much work to get color consistent, high quality photos at home. You really have to, it's kind of an art form. And It's typically for people that are producing very limited prints for competitions and are very peculiar or particular about how they want them to look. So for most of us, when we send things out to get them printed, we're sending them to a lab, whether it's Costco, whether it's a big lab like Bay Photo or White House Custom Color or MPix. What we're doing is we're exporting files to send to them for printing. And 95% of the labs ask for your files to be sent to them in JPEGs. So what we're going to talk about next is using how we get finished copies of these photos that we can send to somebody and have printed. All right, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be exporting to create files. All right. So there are a couple ways to do this. And the simplest thing is I'm going to pick this photo. Okay, since this is the one we've been playing with today. And by the way, the version of this photo that I eventually processed, I got rid of the stop sign and the street sign. I photoshopped them into oblivion. So they didn't fit, for me, they didn't fit aesthetically with the mailboxes. So I got rid of the stop sign. All right. So when we export, there are a couple ways to get at it. So I'll, since Anita's been having a tough morning, I'll show you the menu way to do it first. All right, so we're gonna come over to File, and about halfway down on the File menu, there's an item that's called Export. And you'll see where it says Export, there's also a keyboard shortcut, Control-Shift-E. Both of them will work to get into the export dialog. So I'm just going to click on the export dialog, and it pulls it up. And I'm going to close that because it's going to hurt everybody's heads. All right.
Or you can right click on the photo, correct?
I thought you didn't like shortcuts. I'm sitting here throwing you a bone and you just kicked me to the curb. See what happens? You try to be nice to people, and the next thing you know, you're getting Lightroom jammed in your ear.
No
Sorry.
good deed ever goes unpunished.
Sorry.
Okay. No more menu stuff for you there, Miss Anita.
Oh.
Just okay. As Anita said, you can right click on the image and it'll pull up a dialog. Oh, here, I'll cancel out. If I right click on the image, down near the bottom of the pop-up dialog, it'll say export. And if I click on it, it'll give me another pop-up dialog. Yours will probably be a lot smaller than mine. And then click on the export and it brings me back to the same dialog. Okay, so we need to take a quick tour of this dialog box because there's some important things going on. Okay, so this area here is where we're going to make all the settings that will control what the file that we're going to export looks like. Okay, and we'll go through the different settings here in a minute. This box up here tells us where we're going to send it. Okay, so this is dumb. If I come in here and click the drop down, you have some options. Now, you're not going to have that LR/Mogrify because that's a plugin that I have on my computer. And but you should have email, hard drive, and possibly, depending on the hardware you're in your equipment, CD/DVD. These are the typical destinations where you can send it. Most of the time, most people wind up sending it to their hard drive. You can directly send it to your email program and have it attached as an email to go out. All right. So we're going to, for right now, we're going to send these, we're going to leave it as sending them to the hard drive. so the next part of the panel that I want to talk about are, wait for it, presets. And you are probably, how you feel about developing presets or not, if you export a lot for printing, you are going to want to create printing or export presets. And export presets, the idea is exactly the same as a developing preset. Over here in the main window, you'll set all the settings that you want about how you want the photo exported, and then you'll create a preset over here. So in the future, you can do a one-click export, and I'll show you how that works in just a minute. All right. So this box down here, post-processing actions, is most likely on your computer empty. There's nothing in there. Does anybody have anything in that box? All right. So the reason I have something in this box is we bought a plugin that does some exporting stuff for us. And ours is a program called Mogrify. And it does a bunch of things for us that we find useful. Whether you need a plugin or not depends on the kind of things that you do. All right. Most folks typically wind up not getting presets or plugins. And the plugin manager down here at the bottom is how you import those plugins into your program. And there's all kinds of plugins that you can get that will go in here. It just depends on whether you actually need them. All right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to come up here, and just like on everywhere else in Lightroom, wherever we see these little triangle symbols, we can expand and collapse the boxes. So I'm going to collapse all mine, and we'll talk about what these boxes do one at a time. So we're going to start with export location, and this is exactly what it sounds like. It is because we're sending it to the hard drive, it's asking us, where do you want it? Because it can put it anywhere. So the default setting is that it's going to put this exported photo that you're about to send to the hard drive in the same folder where the original file was. That's the default. 90% of the time, that's where we send things. There are some other options. Okay, you can send it to a specific folder. So you would click that. And that is the second most common one that people will use, is if you click specific folder, what happens is that another box activates underneath it to allow you to choose which specific folder you want to send it to. So if I click specific folder, then come over here to choose, it will open up Finder or a Finder-like screen on a Mac, or a Windows Explorer-like screen on a PC. And all you do is navigate to the folder where you want the program to export the file you're about to create. Okay. So there are some other choices in here. This choose folder later, it says useful for presets. That's if you want to create a generic export, but you don't, you're going to select the photos, the location each time you export the photo. Okay. We don't use that one, but we have. And then here are some other standard locations that will be different on a PC and a Mac. The desktop, your documents folder, your user folder, those are the user folder is a PC thing. What do you Mac folks have starting at desktop going down?
Specific folder, same folder as original, choose folder later, desktop, documents folder, home folder, movies folder, picture folder.
Is that pretty much everybody for on the Mac side?
Same.
Okay. So those are your choices. So for right now, we're going to go back and I'm going to select same folder as original, because I want to keep track of where these guys go. And I'm not smart enough most of the time to remember weird places. Okay. So the next couple boxes that we've got where it says put in subfolder. Well, here's the deal. I want to export these files into the same folder so that the picture of this mailbox will be in the same folder of my trip to Homer, but I don't want it in with everything else. I want to put them in a subfolder so that I know that these JPEGs are in a specific place and they're not mixed in with my raw files. So what I would do in this case was I would click put in subfolder, and then I'm going to put exported JPEGs. Okay. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it Frank. You can, and depending on what we're doing, I'll show you later some of the presets we've set up about where we send things. But I just give it a name. So now what will happen is when we export this file, it's going to put it in the same folder where the original raw file is. It's going to create, if the subfolder doesn't exist, it will create it. If it does exist, it will use it, and then it will put the JPEG I'm about to create in that subfolder. And this is a way for me to help keep things organized and neat and orderly inside my catalog and my folders. Speaking of the catalog, right below it, I can opt to either have the JPEG I'm about to create added to the catalog or not. I typically don't, because for me, JPEGs are final products that are out the door, and once I send them to the lab to be printed, I delete them, because I can always make a new one. All right. But if you want to add your JPEGs to your catalog, you would simply check this box, and then once the program created the new JPEG, saved it into the folder, it would automatically add it into your catalog. All right, I'm going to uncheck that. All right. So the next box down, existing files, it's going to say if there is a file with the same name at the same location, what do you want me to do? This is the program talking to you. Normally, what I do is I leave it as ask what to do. And if you're creating another file with the exact same file name in the exact same place, a little window will pop up when you export that says, hey, there's already a file there with this name. What do you want me to do? And you'd normally get two choices. You can overwrite it, or you can save it with a similar but slightly different name. It normally just chunks a number on the end of it. All right. Or you can automatically tell it to write one with a similar but slightly different name, or overwrite it automatically, which means don't ask me, just get rid of the old one and put the new one in. Or you can tell it, don't export this one, just skip it. Those are your choices. My recommendation is leave it on ask what to do. And then every time it happens, a little window will pop up and say, what do you want me to do? And then you can control it, and it's just a click in the export window. All right, so that controls where the photo is going. And I probably should have covered this before, and it's maybe a bad thing to skip. I want to make sure we understand that when we export a folder, what we're doing. I've gone to great lengths to say that Lightroom is a catalog system, that it doesn't make any changes to your original raw files or any changes to your JPEGs or your TIFFs or any other files that you've imported. What happens now is if we go back to this photo that I've been working on, the underlying raw file that I've made all these adjustments to has not been altered in any way. Everything that I'm seeing is a preview of what a final file of this combination of raw file and adjustments will look like if I create one. And the way I create one is to export it. They struggled a lot, I think, when they first designed Lightroom as to what to call these, because a lot of people think that when you export it, you're kicking the photo out of the catalog, that you're taking this photo and moving it out of the catalog, and that's not what's happening. So when I go into the export module for this photo, what's going to happen is when I get to the point where I click the button that says export, Lightroom is going to take the original file, apply all the changes I've made to it in the develop panel, and create a new file that it writes to wherever I tell it to.
Question.
Go ahead.
So we're processing a raw file and then we're going to export it. Does it change into JPEG automatically?
You're not changing anything. That's what I just was saying.
Yeah.
You're not changing stuff. What you're doing is you're creating a new file
Creating a
from
new file.
scratch.
Okay.
Right.
So when I export it, is it still going to be a raw, like in .cr2, or is it going to be in JPEG?
It depends, and we'll get to that in a second because you have
Okay.
the option as to what file format you want to export as.
Yeah, that's what I was asking about. Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to go back into the export module. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the photo, right click, pull up the first pop-up, which will give me export down here, and then I'm going to come all the way up to the top, click export, which opens my dialog box back up. All right, so I've decided that what I'm going to do is I'm going to send whatever file I've created into a subfolder called export JPEGs. All right, so that's where it's going. All right, so I've gotten all the location stuff done. And you can leave these boxes open. I'm just closing them for clarity's sake. File naming. So we have the option on renaming the file when we export it. And if you remember the dialog box when we were doing importing and renaming files, this works exactly the same way. So the default is you're going to use the file name, the existing file name, and it'll just create a new copy with the existing file name. If you want to rename it, you can come in here and start playing around with all the different options to rename a file. And there's lots of different reasons why you might rename something when you export it. So for example, with our clients, what we do, our typical procedure here in the studio is when we photograph a client, we import all their photographs, we rename all the photographs once we've imported them with their name and the original 4-digit suffix that was on the original capture. And that's the way we track them internally. When a lot of our clients are high school seniors, so at a certain point of the year, we have to create their file that's going to be their photo that will appear in the yearbook because we have to send it to the school. The school doesn't care about that 4-digit number. And so what we do is when we export their yearbook photo, we export it with just their name and not the 4-digit number, because we're only exporting just one photo to send to the school. So that's one way that we export things, where we rename them in a way that's different than normal. Photos that we send to the lab, typically for printing for a client, we don't rename them. We use the renamed version from import, their name with the suffix. When we export them, we use the file name, and that's a way for us to keep track and a match between what we have on our computer and what gets printed on the back of the photo as a reference number. All right. So I'm not going to spend any time talking about how to do the renaming thing, because it works here exactly like it does in the library module. It's the exact same tool. Right. So, but for my purposes, just renaming it with the file name is going to be good in this case. So I'm going to leave it there. All right, we're not doing video, so I'm skipping over that. Now we're going to come down to file settings. And Lorelei, this is going to answer your question. So the very first box in this window is what format you want. And if I click on it, you can see that I have about 6 choices. I can export it as a JPEG, which is what we most typically do because we're sending them to the lab. You can export it as a PSD, which is the file extension that is native for Photoshop. You can export it as a TIFF, which I still don't understand why people are using TIFFs these days. There's just no benefit to it. You can export it as a PNG, which is a type of file that's typically used on websites. or a DNG, and there's a lot of reasons that people are using DNGs, or you can export it in its original format. So if you wanted to export a raw copy of this photo, you can select it here. But understand that once you do, none of your develop settings apply anymore. You can't develop a raw file.
What? Say it again?
When you export, if you were to, the photo that we're looking at is a raw file. So if
Right.
I came down here and picked original, okay, as my image format, it's going to export a raw version of my photo.
Right.
Okay? You can't make changes to a raw file in Lightroom. So if you do this, you're just exporting a copy of your original raw file without changes.
Wait, you can't make changes to raw files in Lightroom? That's what we've been doing all along.
No, we're not making changes to raw files. We're making changes to the previews of raw files.
Okay.
We haven't made
Okay.
any changes to a raw file.
Okay.
The files in Lightroom are left untouched.
Right,
When
right.
Lightroom exports using, if you have a raw file and you're exporting a copy of it, you're using the export module, and you tell it to use the original format, it's going to copy the original raw file out
Okay.
without the changes. Okay. If, on the other hand, we were creating a PSD or a JPEG, all of the changes that we made in the preview are applied to the image, and then a new format file is created in a new format. In this case, this would be a PSD that I could use in Photoshop.
Question.
Go ahead.
So if I wanted to send you, I finished up on a raw file preview that I had edited, and I said, oh, I want to send Marco my raw file of this bird. And I hit original and I exported it. I would be exporting that file without any of my edits on it. Is that correct?
That's correct. Only if you're exporting the original, and the original, if you export the original file is what gets exported. And remember, Lightroom doesn't make any changes to the original file. So you're basically exporting a copy of the original image.
Oh boy, sorry, my brain was thick on that. So if I exported the PSD, then that's going to have the edits on it, and that would be, okay, I get it. I'm with you. Sorry, Marco.
That's okay.
Do we have to worry about print quality at any time then?
Yes, and we're going to talk about that in just a sec.
Okay.
So I'm going to go back up, because the most typical export format, if you're sending something to a lab, about 90% of labs that you'll deal with, what they want you to give them is a JPEG. Some labs will ask for TIFFs, but not many. Okay. If you have been in our studio, all the photos that we have on display at the studio were exported as JPEGs and sent to the labs that we work with.
So under what circumstances would you export a PSD file?
Let's say you want to export a copy of the PSD to give to, put on a flash drive or give to a friend or something. I don't know. I have never exported a PSD or a TIFF or an original file from Lightroom.
I just don't know what purpose would be served by it. I'm trying to think of that.
They tried to make the tool flexible. So,
Okay.
and I'm sure there's people that are doing it. I'm just not one of them.
Okay.
I got to say that the only things that I've exported in any real numbers out of Lightroom are JPEGs and DNGs.
Okay, thanks.
Because we experimented with DNGs for a while, a couple years ago. All right.
So hang
Go
on,
ahead.
question. So if, for example, I have a photography buddy that I want them to process something for me, or like, here, let's see what you can do with this. Does that make sense? I want to share a file, a raw file with him, or whatever format that is. What would be the best format so that they could make the changes?
It depends on what they've got. I mean, normally I like to send people, if you're going to ask somebody to work on something, and that happens, we get hired periodically to edit other people's work. And if they've got a raw version of it, that's what I want. If they don't have a raw version, what I want is the absolute largest JPEG or TIFF that they've got. So if you've got a raw file, I would send them a raw file if they have Lightroom or some other software that allows them to do Lightroom work on raw files. Otherwise, you'll probably want to send them either a TIFF or a JPEG.
Or PSD?
If they've got Photoshop.
So when would
But if they've
people,
got Photoshop, you can send them a raw file.
so when would people export DNGs?
It could be that they're wanting to share a high resolution version of a photo with somebody, but they want to cut down the bandwidth when they email them or put them on Dropbox. Because a DNG typically will be smaller than the raw file it was created from.
Because we're currently uploading photos to a Dropbox for other people to edit. And I was assuming that if I uploaded DNGs, that would be more neutral and that anybody could edit it with any editing software.
That's mostly true, and that was the intent of the DNG format from Adobe, but it's not entirely true. DNGs will be rearwardly compatible with older versions of Lightroom and Photoshop, which was the point, is that they were supposed to be as universal as a JPEG. But there's still sometimes you'll run into some editing applications that won't work on them.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to export as a JPEG because that typically is the most common format. So where it's going will drive the quality settings slider, which is just to the right. And this comes back to what you were asking, Ginger, is if you are going to send this thing to the lab to be printed, you definitely want the quality for your JPEG to be at 100. If you're exporting these things to be displayed on the internet, you can get away, with the quality all the way down at 60, and nobody on the internet on a computer browser will be able to tell the difference in image quality, but the file will be much smaller. And if you're building a web page, like we have a web page that we maintain, the speed with which our web page loads depends on the image quality and the size of the photograph. So the smaller the photographs are for us on our web page, the better, because they'll load fast. So when we're exporting for our website, we'll set the quality at 60. When we send stuff to the lab, we set the quality at 100. Does that make sense?
Sure does.
There are lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of arguments and discussions on the internet about the proper quality settings for different export purposes. The only thing everybody agrees on is if you're going to have it printed, set it at 100. Okay. Some folks say you can go all the way down to 40 for the internet. Some people say no, you don't want to go below 80. We use 60. All right. So the next thing is color space. And this gets into a geeky thing. I'm assuming that most of you are using the sRGB color space.
Yes.
Okay, so if you were not, and we don't, we use the Adobe RGB color space here because we bought the upgraded monitors so that we could. Where we set the color space depends on where the photo is going. So for example, most, but not all of the labs that we deal with print in the Adobe color space. So for us, like with Bay Photo, if we're sending an order to Bay Photo, we shoot in the Adobe color space, we work in Photoshop and Lightroom in the Adobe color space, then we export in the Adobe RGB color space and send it to the lab. Okay, no problem. Here's where the problem comes in. The internet My computer keeps beeping and I can't figure out why.
That's probably my stupid phone with text notifications. Let me turn that off.
I thought it sounded like it was coming from my computer, like an app
It's
that-
probably my stupid phone. Sorry.
All right. So the thing that you got to understand is if you ever get to a point where you upgrade to a different color space, is that web browsers only display the sRGB color space. They cannot display the Adobe RGB color space, or worse yet, ProPhoto, which is an even bigger color space. So when you're exporting things to go on the web, you always need to make sure that they are at sRGB. If your workflow has been sRGB, it's not going to be an issue. But if you're working in Adobe like we do, we always have to remember that things that we're going to put on our web page or on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter need to be converted into the sRGB color space when they're exported. All right, so I'm going to set the color space at sRGB. This box to the right of it where it says limit file size, you may be submitting something to someplace where they've told you that the file cannot be any bigger than this big. It can only be 500 kilobytes. So if that would be the case, you would click in limit the file size to, and then you would type in 500 kilobytes. What you'll notice happens when you do that is the minute you click in the limit file size, the quality box gets grayed out. And what the software will do is it will use the highest quality setting possible that it can and still keep the file size under 500 kilobytes.
So for like Bear Paw, the file format is 4 megs. So you would put limit file size to
4,000.
3,800 or
4,000 would be 4 megs, yeah. Or
4,000 K.
Yeah.
And you could create a preset for that.
Yes. And we'll come back to presets in a minute.
Okay.
All right. So in this particular case, I am not going to limit the file size. This file is going to go on our website. So I'm going to set the export value to 60, the quality. So it's a JPEG, it's sRGB, and the quality is 60. All right. So I'm going to come down to image sizing. And
I'm sorry, Marco, I apologize. But while we're still on this part about file settings, let's say you're sending it off to Costco, which a lot of people commonly do. Are you putting your color space at sRGB or are you doing Adobe?
you have to find out what they print in, okay? And I don't know what
if they print in Adobe, then you've got to go back into Lightroom to where you told us at the beginning to put everything at sRGB and put it at Adobe.
No.
In our, huh?
You don't want to do that because if your computer equipment does not display the Adobe color space, you can't see what you're doing. You're making color adjustments with your eyes closed is basically what's happening. So
Okay.
if your monitor displays, your camera is capable of shooting either color space. All the cameras, all the cameras that all of you own can shoot in both sRGB and Adobe RGB. The issue becomes, does the computer display you're using show you the Adobe color space? And the answer most frequently is no. Unless you've gone out and specifically purchased a monitor or a display rather that will show you the Adobe color space. They're
So
coming down in price.
if our monitors are all sRGBs, then we would never be exporting in anything but sRGB, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thanks. Sorry, I got derailed again.
That's okay. There's a lot of misunderstanding, I think, about how color space works and how you should shoot. And I ran into an article on Facebook just yesterday. I blocked the guy now because I think he's an imbecile. But this guy said that, well, you should always shoot in ProPhoto, or shoot in Adobe and then process in ProPhoto, because they give you the most latitude. And the guy's working on a basic Dell monitor, which I know doesn't even display all of the Adobe of the sRGB color space.
Hmm.
And so I'm fascinated to see what his finished images look like, because it's probably always a surprise when he gets stuff back from the lab.
While we're on this, how do we find out what our monitor, the color space is for it? I just bought an external.
What you're going to have to do typically, because it's the only people that worry about this are photographers and graphic designers. And so it's not typically a spec that's like on the box. You're going to have to go online and Google your particular monitor model number and ask the question color space.
Okay.
And then it will frequently give it to you. Like, for example, Tina just bought a new computer, and you got one of the Cine displays, didn't you, Tina?
My daughter bought it for me and I love it, but I don't know any particulars. Sorry.
Okay. I think from the photo that you showed me, it's a Cine display. And the Cine displays are really nice. They're big, they're really crisp, they've got good color stability. And the Cine display shows 125% of the sRGB color space. So it's got all the sRGB and a little bit more. It displays about 84% of the Adobe color space. I think it's been a while since I checked the numbers, but that's about right. So she gets complete coverage in sRGB, but if she worked in Adobe, she would be missing almost 20% of the color space. So you've got to Google your monitor and search specifically for color space for it. And generally speaking, if you can't find any information about the color space that your monitor projects, then it's an sRGB or less. And if it's a $50 monitor, it's less than sRGB. I'm just going to say that up front. Okay, so image sizing. This is something that drives me up a wall because this is a math thing, okay? We've got to go back to what your photographs are made of. And what your photographs are made up of are millions of dots of color. Okay, and every photo has a size based on the number of dots it's got. So I'm going to make up an old camera setting. We're going to say that the camera that you're shooting with is a 12 megapixel camera. Okay, it's got 12 megapixels. So 12 megapixels means that each photo that your camera creates has 12 million dots in it. And those dots could be, if it's, we'll just say that it's 3,000 rows tall and 4,000 columns wide of dots. That's what your photo is made up of, 12 million dots of color, all right? Resolution is really misunderstood. And resolution is the number of dots you need to have per inch in your final product. And so if you're printing, if you're going to send your photo to a lab to be printed, the industry standard for high resolution prints is 300 dots per inch in the final exported file. Okay. Now, if your final exported file only has 280 dots per inch, is the world going to explode in flame? No, it won't. But the further you get away on the lower side from 300, the more likely it is that you will eventually start to experience pixelation in your photo. If you go over 300 dots per inch, what happens is you're creating, as a general rule, a file that's bigger than it needs to be. Okay, and so, for example, we do business with Bay Photo. We send all of our stuff to California to be printed, to Bay Photo anyways, electronically over the internet, okay? So I pay for the bandwidth for every photo that I send. So I want them to be big enough to print at 300 dots per inch and not a dot more, because it doesn't increase the print quality at all, but it makes the file larger. So I want the files to be the exact right size to create a high quality print. All right, so we live and die here on the 300 pixels per inch. Whether you do or not depends entirely on where you're printing, what it is that you want out of your prints and that sort of stuff. Okay, so when you go to export for the web, things are slightly different. Generally speaking, what you want when you're exporting photographs that you're going to share on Facebook or Instagram or put on a website of your own, and I know, Tina, you've got a website for your business. What you want is you want the photos to be large enough to print, to display well on your computer, but not so big that when someone goes to your website, it takes forever for those photos to download. If you've ever been to a website, excuse me, that takes forever to load, like you click on it and you're sitting there and you're getting the spinning wheel of waiting. What's typically happening is it's taking the computer network a long time to download all the pictures for the website, okay? So what we're looking for on the web photos, and that includes Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, any social media platform, or a website that you own, is you want the photos to be large enough to display at the size that you want nicely on the computer, but be as small as possible. And the general guideline for that is you want your photos to be 72 to 96 pixels per displayed inch on your computer. So if you're setting up your website so that a photo should display at 2 inches by 2 inches, what you're looking at is a photo that in the final version, you want the photo to be more or less 150 pixels by 150 pixels on each image. Okay.
Sorry, I was distracted by, so at first I just saw the second part, resolution, but are you talking about both numbers?
I'm not talking about, I don't want you to be looking at the computer at all right now, because we're just talking about the numbers, because what I'm about to tell you is going to tell you that how we use this resolution screen and why it's important.
Okay.
So
that range, excuse me, that range again was 72 to 96.
yeah, there's disagreement whether it should be 72 or 96. It has to do with the proliferation of high definition monitors. High definition monitors have more pixels in a screen inch than older monitors do. But somewhere in that ballpark is the sweet spot. All right, so when you are designing photos or you're getting ready to export stuff, it's important to understand where it's going and how big the file needs to be for the purposes that you're exporting. So for example, on our studio's website, when you go to our website initially, you're presented with photographs that fill up the entire screen. So those photos, because we want them to display nicely, those photos are 1200 pixels on the long edge. All right, because after a lot of discussion with web designers and reading a lot of articles, for a full screen photo I'm assuming that people are going to be looking at my photos on a computer monitor at home, and it's going to be a modern monitor, which means that it's rectangular, it's horizontally rectangular and not square, that 1200 pixels on the long edge is the way we want to go. So our typical export is 1200 pixels by 800 pixels if it's going to be on our main page on our website. Okay, so this is why it's important to understand where your photos are going and what you're doing with them, because that's going to drive how you use this image size portion of your export. So we're going to talk first about exporting a file to make a print. And I'm going to show you two different ways to approach how you set these settings. All right, so we're going to assume that this photo that we've been working on, the mailboxes, I'm going to make an 8x12 print of it. All right, so one way to do this is that I know that if I want this print to be 12 inches long at 300 pixels per inch, that means the long edge of the photograph has to have 3,600 pixels in it. Okay? So one way to approach this would be, first of all, I click on resize the file because the original file is much bigger than that, right? So I'm going to click on resize, and I'm going to select out of all these choices, I'm going to select long edge, and then I'm going to type in here 3,600. So what the software will do in this case is it will take the long edge of the file and say, in the exported version, the long edge will be 3,600, and the other edge will be whatever length it needs to be to keep the proportions the same. Almost all of our export presets are set up based on the long edge or the short edge of the photo, and we just set the size of one edge. So when you do an item like a choice like this, where you say long edge or short edge, or you give the dimensions directly, whatever number is here in the resolution box is irrelevant. Because what you're telling it on this portion of the box is take the long edge and make it 3,600 pixels. The resolution becomes, it's irrelevant. I could put 722. I could put 18.6. It doesn't matter what's in the resolution when you specify a particular size, which is what I've done over here. Okay, so we could do the same thing on the short edge. So in the case of an 8x12, I could pick the short edge, and in the case of 8x12, 8 by 300 is 2,400 pixels. So I would type 2,400 pixels in here, and what the software would do in this case is it would create an output file that's 2,400 pixels on the short edge, and then the long edge it would make as long as it needed to be to keep the proportions correct. And again, the resolution doesn't matter.
Are you saying that you're what's causing you to choose between short edge and long edge?
Sometimes it's just, for us, for example, this almost always, our output things are set on the long edge. The only time that we typically pick a short edge is when we're exporting stuff to go on Instagram, because Instagram has a real weird window size. It's 1080 pixels wide by 1350 tall. And if our photo is not exactly those proportions, we have to fit it inside the 1080 window. So we would set short edge 1080 and export it. But most of our export pixels are based on the long edge. I mean, export settings.
So when you're putting in dimensions and resolution no longer matters because it's going to go based on the dimensions, will there be a time where you get low resolution? Like when you know what I'm saying? Like it's not the print quality it needs to be.
If you export, like for example, if I export a file to print at 8x12, I'm going to wind up with a file that is 3,600 pixels on the long edge and 2,400 pixels on the short edge.
Right.
And that's great so long as I print at 8x12 or smaller. If I was to take that 8x12 sized print and try and print it at 20x30, it's now not anywhere near large enough to keep the resolution. And so we wind up suffering wicked pixelation.
Right.
So what we do is that if we have a client that's ordered a 20x30 copy of a print and an 8x12 copy of the print, we export both.
Okay.
One for the 20x30 and one for the 8x12.
Okay.
Why wouldn't you just always set your resolution at 300 and forget about the rest if you're printing?
300 for what though? How big is your
For
photo?
your resolution.
No, how big is, don't talk resolution, talk big. How big is the photo?
Well, let's say it's 13 by 19.
Okay, that's different because we still, when we talk resolution, then we have to give it a specific inches, and we'll get there in a second. Okay. Uh, uh, I like to count dots because it's the way that I think. So I know that to print something at 8 by 12 at 300 dots per inch, it needs to be 3,600 pixels on the long edge. Okay, but there is another way to do it. All right. So what we'll do then is we're going to say height and width. And we're going to change this to inches because some people don't like to think pixels, they like to think inches. So if I want to export a photo at 12 inches wide by 8 inches tall, so I've selected height and width in the top box. And then I've changed the measurement from pixels to inches because we're Americans, so we don't play with centimeters. Okay. Now resolution matters incredibly because what will happen is at the current settings, this setting, if I export it, this will create an image that's 12 inches wide by 8 inches tall at 240 pixels per inch. So I would need to come over here and change this number now to 300. And I just exported. I didn't mean to do that. Okay, so resolution matters when you're giving the size of your picture in inches, because now you need to tell the software how many pixels you want it to give per inch. And there's a lot of people that print this way. One of the reasons I don't is I don't like the way this dialogue, this section of the dialogue has ever been laid out. Okay. What you're supposed to be able to do is if you only enter a value in one box, the software is supposed to keep the output file proportional. I don't trust it. I never have. So in this particular case, if I type 8 by 12 in these boxes and then click 300 or enter 300 in resolution, these output settings would also generate a file that's 3,600 pixels by 2,400 pixels. It's just a different way to think.
So would going up and changing the quality ever change those? So like if you put in your size of photo and then went up and changed the quality to 100, would it change your resolution?
No. Resolution and quality are different controls. So if I go up here and pull this slider back and forth to different values, the photo will still have 2,400 by 3,600 pixels in it. It's just that the quality of the image itself will be reduced.
Quality in what way if it's not affecting resolution?
Color saturation, color banding.
Okay.
There's a lot of things that start to happen that happen at the lower output levels of JPEGs.
Okay.
So if you use the width and the height, how do you know what to set the resolution at? Like, is there a way to find that out?
Yep, and it depends on where it's going. So for example, if I was going to print this, I would want the resolution at 300 because that's the industry standard for high resolution, high quality prints that you're going to have printed at a lab and hang on the wall.
Okay.
Now, if I go back to, I'm going to output this for the web, this is what I would do is I would either talk to my web designer if I've hired one, which I didn't, or decide I want this photograph to be this big on the computer. So let's say I want the photo to be 6 inches by 4 inches. On the web, okay? So I tell it now to export this at 6 inches by 4 inches, but now I come back here and I set the web resolution, and I'm gonna go with 72. So these settings will produce a photo that is much, much, much smaller. And in fact, if I had left the settings at 8 by 12, you would have had a file that was about a quarter the size of the same file at 300 pixels per inch. Because now what it's going to do is, let me do the math real quick. So 8 inches by 72 pixels is only 576 pixels versus 2,400 pixels on a print version of the same file, simply by changing the resolution from 300 to 72. So if you're exporting for print in the resolution box, I would recommend 300. If you're exporting to put it on a web page or social media, I would recommend setting your resolution between 72 and 96.
Okay, Marco?
Yeah.
So there's a web page for, it's a high level photographer's web page for Alaska nature photography. And I see amazing pictures on there. Does that mean because they're so amazing and sharp and the eyes on all the animals are so clear and bright and sharp, does that mean that they're exporting it onto the website at 300 or at 72? Does it matter?
Well, there's another component to this, and this is something I just can't get into today because it's different. So one of the things is that when you upload a photo to a social media platform like Instagram or Photoshop, there is a size they want photos to be for different places on their page, okay? Photographs display differently in different parts of your Facebook world. If your file is too big, if it exceeds what they want, they have an algorithm that makes it smaller. They downsample it. And what frequently happens to people, not always, but what frequently happens to people on Instagram and Facebook in particular is that their photos wind up looking super crappy when they upload them. And it's typically because the files were too big. And so what happened is that Facebook and Instagram's algorithm made them smaller, and their make smaller algorithms suck. So what you want to do is, depending on which platform you're using, you want to make sure that you've got the settings correct. So for example, I know that Instagram wants their photos to be 1080 pixels wide by 1350 pixels tall. And that's how big we make them. Exactly.
Huh. Okay.
Facebook
Well,
is a lot
thanks.
harder because if the photo shows up in different places, it's different sizes. As a general rule, we export photos for Facebook to be 1200 pixels on the long edge. And my experience has been that they display well. They're big and they display well.
If you don't think in pixels, what would that translate into for just exporting at a certain resolution, pixels per inch? 72?
You can't have just resolution, Anita. A resolution has to be attached to a size.
Okay.
Okay. Resolution only works when you're talking about inches or feet or centimeters, some sort of linear measurement. And then you're telling the software in that measurement, put this many pixels per unit.
So if you're exporting to Facebook at 1200 on the long edge, what do you set your resolution at? 72?
Doesn't matter. It's 1200. 1200 pixels is 1200 pixels.
Okay.
And that's why I don't, me personally, that's why I don't use the resolution thing. We always determine here how big in pixels things need to be. And in fact, if you go to the pages that talk about resolution settings for Facebook, they don't talk in inches, they talk in pixels.
Huh.
Because
so you're saying you only set resolution if you're using the width and height.
that's correct. You only use resolution when you're talking about a linear measurement like inches or centimeters. And for most people, that is typically only going to apply when you're exporting files to be printed someplace. Like you're going to have a 20 by 30 made or a 10 by 10. You would set your height and width to those dimensions and then set the resolution, which is typically going to be 300. Normally for web uses, you want to find out what the pixel count is that they're looking for and export to that pixel count. Like for example, Instagram. And the only reason I know those Instagram numbers is we've got them written on the bottom of the computer monitor so we don't forget them. So they're right here for me right there.
So do each platform indicate that somewhere in their website about tips or tools about the
Yeah,
size?
but
you know?
typically, like Facebook is horrible because they keep changing things twice a year. And you never know when you go to the Facebook page whether you're finding the most current information. If you Google it, you'll find lots of pages where people keep up to date with what the sizes are. And when you find one for Facebook, it's going to hurt your head because there are like 17 different sizes of images for Facebook. You know, banners are different sizes and shapes than other.
Mm,
Uh, uh, you know, if the photo
cover.
shows up in the news feed, it's this big. If it shows up in the news, if it shows up in another thing, it's a different size, and it's like, oh, okay. So we settled on 1200, and we just kind of
On the long end, right?
on the long edge, yeah.
Okay.
So I
And-
have a question. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Tina.
For my food photography class, I was supposed to make pictures in certain sizes. So it was like landscape 4x3, square for Instagram 1x1. So I was doing all that in the cropping. Like when I cropped the photo, I was
Okay.
going up and putting, does that have anything to do with this then?
Absolutely, it does. Because, for example, I'm going to cancel out of the export window. Is right now, if we go back and look at this photo, the aspect ratio of this photo is 4x6 or 2x3, okay? Which is the aspect ratio that my camera shoots in, which also happens to be 8x12. They're the same ratio, okay? So if I wanted to print this whole photo as an 8x12, I would leave it cropped in this ratio because this is an 8x12 ratio. But let's say I had a client that said, I'd love this photo, but I'd like it to be a 1x1. I want it to be square. I want it to be print at 10x10 inches to the final product. So I would come down here and I would set my crop ratio to 1:1 to make it square. And then I'll recrop the photo for export the way that I want. Okay, so now with everything applied, this is the photograph that I'm ready to export. So now I'm going to come up to the export window. And when I get here, if I was going to export this at 10x10, I would enter 10 in each of these windows. So it's going to export for me a 10x10 inch file, and I'm going to set the resolution at 300. That would be one way to do it. The way that I personally would do it is I would come up here and I would leave it at long edge because that's where we do most of our stuff. And because in a square photo, the long edge and the short edge are the same size, it doesn't matter. So I would say that I would go back to pixels, and 10 inches by 300 is 3,000 pixels. And I would just say, make the long edge 3,000 pixels. That gives you this setting and that setting are different ways to get the exact same outputted file. It's just a matter of how you think. I think in pixels. Everything we do is in pixels because that way we're not going back and forth between web settings and print settings. Everything's in pixels. The girls, when they first start working here, hated it, all right? And I bent them to my will. It's like my only success story as an employer is I make them all think in pixels.
Is there a better way how to figure out all these? If you're going to print an image and then how much pixel, is there like a table or?
No, but it's real simple. The math is really simple, Lorelei, is you figure out.
That scares me. Math, hello, okay.
Okay.
I'm with you.
All right, it's really simple, is that just think 300. If you're printing 300. So for example, what's a size print that you might want to make?
Oh geez, I don't print, so I have no idea. Just throw something for an example.
Somebody pick a number.
16x20.
All right.
There you go.
So let's say you wanted to make a 16x20. Now, there's a couple things that we have to keep in mind. First of all, the file that you're going to export, you need to crop it to 16 by 20. The camera that you shoot doesn't shoot in that ratio. Your camera shoots in a 2:3 aspect ratio. 16 by 20 happens to be 8 by 10, not 8 by 12. So you would have to crop your photo to a 16 by 20 ratio to start so that it's the right shape. Okay, so that's step one. You crop it to a 16 by 20 ratio, and that's real easy to do. And that, you know what, that I just realized that's something I forgot to show you. All right, we'll go back to that in a sec. All right, so now what you need to do is figure out how big it needs to be. So if you don't want to do math, okay, then what you would do is you would come in here and you would click width and height, and you would put 16 by 20 in these boxes, and then just make sure that resolution was 300 because you're making a print and you're done.
Okay.
That's the simplest way to do it. But live, breathe, and die that whenever you print, it's 300. Whether you're doing the math yourself and coming up with the pixel count, or you're setting the resolution, it's 300 for prints. That's the standard.
And so if you're going to be typing in the 16 by 20 and 300, prior to that, you would have wanted in your develop module to set the crop to 16 by 20.
Right. So let me go back and show you how to do that.
And that's absolutely necessary.
Absolutely, because otherwise the software, if you take a photo that is, this photo is a 8 by 12 ratio, okay? 16 by 20 is an 8 by 10 ratio, okay? So when you go to export this photo to print as a 16 by 20, you're going to lose portion of it because they're different shapes.
Okay.
If you don't crop it, the software is going to guess what part you want to keep. And it typically takes it out of the middle. Okay, if that's what you want, that's great. But if not, you need to tell it. So after you play with ratios for a while, you realize that there are some standard ones. Like 16 by 20 is one that jumped out as standard because it's a variation, it's a larger version of an 8 by 10. Okay, it's one that we deal with a lot. But let's say it's not one that you were familiar with. So if I go back to this original photo, I need to crop this to 16 by 20. So I go over here to original, click the drop down, and I check down my list and I don't see 16 by 20. Well, that sucks. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to click on enter custom, and I'm going to type in 16 by 20 and go OK. And now the software is cropping it to 16 by 20 for me. And you can see how much of the photo I've got to give up to do 16 by 20. So do I want, this is what the computer would do if you didn't crop it and exported it as 16 by 20. But do I want this? Do I want that? Or do I want something else altogether? Okay, that's why you need to set the crop to match your output shape. The shapes need to match. Otherwise, you're going to get surprised.
Is that why sometimes when you send pictures for printing, they're cropped horribly? You know, like maybe send it to Walmart.
Exactly. If you send, is anybody here shooting a 3/4 camera? No. Okay. So everybody here is shooting a camera that shoots with a 2:3 aspect ratio. Okay. So 2:3 is also 4:6, and it's 8:12. All three of those numbers, 2:3, 4:6, and 8:12, are the same shape. All right. So that's the shape that your camera shoots in. For some inexplicable reason, the 8x10 refuses to die the death it was due in the 1950s, okay? But it lingers on, all right? Like the coronavirus, it just won't leave.
It needs to leave.
Soon.
It does. So what happens is, if you take a photo with your camera and you don't crop it, you have a photo that is 8x12, which is what you're looking at on my screen. If I send this to Walmart or Costco, uncropped, and tell them print it as an 8x10, this is what they're going to do to it. Because that you gave them a file that's the wrong shape, they're going to crop it in the middle. Generally speaking, if the size file is not the same shape as the file that you asked to have printed, the software crops it dead out of the middle. And so 5x7s are not the same shape as anything else. 11x14s are also not the same shape as anything else. So if you take one file and you send it to Walmart or Costco and you say, print this file as an 8x12, an 8x10, an 11x14, and a 5x7, those photographs are all going to look different when they come back. And they'll all be cropped dead out of the middle except for the 8x12. So that's why they need to match. All righty. It is noon, or almost noon. Let's take a 5-minute break to stretch, and then we'll come back.
Before we do that, I have one quick observation.
Okay?
My internet guru says that Costco, the color space is sRGB.
Okay. That's what I would have expected, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, me too, but thanks.
So we're gonna head back to the export module. All right, so once we finally get through all of the gyrations about how big we want this thing to be, then we're ready to go to the next window, which is output sharpening. And this is another, this is another location or item where people like to argue about the appropriate settings. And if you've been in photography now for more than a week, what you've probably discovered is that I think photographers are combative by nature, and whatever you're doing, you're going to find 1,000 photographers to tell you you're doing it wrong. And why you're a horrible person for doing it wrong too. Not just that it's wrong, but that you're horrible. But anyways, this is yet another place where you can sharpen your images. And there's a lot of discussion about whether to use output sharpening in Lightroom if you're also working on your photos in Photoshop. The old school approach to sharpening is that you're supposed to sharpen a photo 3 times. Once when you initially, a digital photo, once when you initially import it, because digital photos are by their nature not completely sharp, and then editing sharpening while you're working on it so that you get the finished image, and then output sharpening. For all of its great tools, the output sharpening options in Lightroom are not great. And this is another area that a lot of photographers have been bugging Adobe about for years, is to increase the controls in output sharpening, because it's not obvious what's going on here. Adobe gives you 3 options for sharpening your photos when they're ready to be output. Screen, matte paper, and glossy paper, okay? And sometimes, depending on what you're printing on, whether you should go for the matte paper option or the glossy paper option isn't clear. Because some papers straddle the border. Like, for example, one of the paper surfaces that we print a lot of our products on for clients is called luster paper, which is kind of a hybrid between matte and glossy paper. And so we went back and forth for years on trying to figure out what setting was going to work best, and we eventually settled on glossy. So the amount of sharpening that's applied to your file is dependent on 3 factors. One, the size that it is, how big it is, and the quality settings that you set earlier. The second one is which one of these 3 options that you select. And the third one is the amount that you ask it to apply. And unfortunately, there's not a scientific way for me to tell you what to set, other than if you're going to put your photo on the internet, Facebook, Instagram, a web page, whatever, you're going to select screen. When it comes to printing, selecting between matte and glossy is a toss-up, and you may have to experiment some with your lab before you come up with the one that you like the best. If that doesn't make you comfortable, then unfortunately the next answer is go back into Photoshop to do your output sharpening, which is super tedious, or you can buy a raster image processor to do your sharpening for you, which adds an entirely another layer of processing and complexity onto the process. For most of the stuff that we print in our studio, we select glossy paper and standard. Low, standard, and high just affect the amount of sharpening. What you want to avoid is over sharpening, because when you over sharpen images, you get halos. You get odd looking halo effects around edges. You would see it in people's eyes. If they're a light colored subject in front of a dark background, you'll see weird halo effects around them. So for most of our output, we select for printing glossy paper and standard, unless we're printing on a true matte paper, in which case we'll select matte paper, but we also leave the amount at standard. And remember, what sharpening does is it finds edges and increases the contrast on the bright and dark side of the edges to make them more pronounced. That's what's really happening.
So Marco, if you've used within Photoshop the Topaz sharpening tool, would you at this point uncheck this box because you've sharpened in Photoshop?
Well, remember, it depends what kind of sharpening that you did, because the image that you see on your computer is not necessarily going to translate well to a printed copy without output sharpening. And it depends how you're sharpening inside of Photoshop if you're doing it there. Because some people would consider using the sharpening tool from Topaz that you use as edit sharpening, which is the second time that you sharpen your photo.
Okay.
Is you input sharpen, you edit sharpen, and then you output sharpen, because the amount of additional sharpening that's necessary is driven largely by how big or how small the print is, what it's going on, what kind of a medium that it's going to be displayed on.
Did we already talk about input sharpening? I guess I don't know the difference between input and when we edit it.
The input sharpening is the basic, it's, let me just drop out of here. A lot of people will input sharpen an image, and for the most part in Lightroom, what that means is in the develop module, down in the details panel, is this is the default, whatever the sharpening values are there, that's your default input sharpening. Okay, so for most people that talk about 3 levels of sharpening, you would sharpen here, and then if you did additional editing in Photoshop, you would do additional editing in Photoshop. And then once you're done, when you output for printing, you would add the output sharpening. So the sharpening that's set here is your input sharpening.
And where is that setting done?
What do you mean, where is it done? Right here.
Like it's going on invisibly behind without us doing anything?
It's if you don't like it, turn it down. It's a setting. It's like any other setting. You can turn it up, you can turn it down.
So,
That's the
but I
default.
notice on my photos, like the input sharpening is different for different photos. It might be 40 here, it might be 25 here.
The standard should be 25. That's the kind of the default.
Okay,
Uh,
all right.
but if you don't like it, just change it. But the sharpening panel down here in the develop module is your input sharpening.
So is that set on the import screen when you're importing your photos?
Nope, it can be. You can establish a preset and then apply that preset on input, on import. And then it will apply whatever value you want there.
Okay.
But I believe the default is the amount is 25, the radius is 1, and the detail is 25. I believe that's the standard default.
Okay, thanks.
But Tina, that's where it occurs, is that your input sharpening is that control there.
Got it.
So most people that only process in Lightroom and don't use Photoshop don't have that second processing. You've got the sharpening here and then the output sharpening, which is driven by your final output size.
If I could go back to glossy and matte for a second.
Sure.
Costco only does luster and glossy.
Okay.
So I assume we go to glossy. And
I would.
yeah.
Well, comment. So Costco has, you can calibrate your output to Costco for their printer, and they have a setting separate, one for luster and one for glossy. And so when I send stuff to Costco, if I have a Northern Lights print, I'll set it for the Costco glossy calibration. And if I don't, if I'm printing on the luster, I set it for the luster paper. So there's two different settings that Costco, you can download a printer profile. That's what I'm looking for Costco's printers. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, no, it does, and I knew that. So basically then, would we not check the sharpen 4 box?
In what circumstance?
Well, if you're going to use the preset from, well, I guess I've answered it. If you're going to use a preset that you've built yourself for specifically one of 2 Costco printers, then you would probably not choose the output sharpening.
That's not necessarily true or correct.
Okay.
Because the profiles deal with color correct, being color correct. All right. If you have a photograph and you're going to print the exact same photograph on matte paper and glossy paper, and you send the exact same file to the lab and say, hey, make me one on this Fuji Deep matte paper and make me one using the same file on the Endura glossy paper. They're going to look wildly different because papers have different response ranges to color. This is why when people talk about true photographs, it drives me nuts because it means they don't know what they're talking about. Is that different papers have different ranges. So for example, matte papers in general can't create true black. They lack the ability to have a true black, black, black. Okay. It's a value referred to as the D max and the D min. Okay. Glossy papers, on the other hand, can come much closer to a true deep black, black, right? So if you have a photograph that you sent to the lab and it's the same file, and there's a lot of dark black areas in it, the photographs are going to look different because the blacks will not be as deep or as dark on the matte paper as they are on the glossy paper. The second thing that typically happens there is that the color saturation levels will be different. Matte papers in general have a lower level of color saturation than glossy papers, but that's not always true. One of the labs that we deal with, Bay Photo, offers about 40 different paper surfaces. And they're all different for a lot of reasons. And there's a lot of reasons if you're a upper end fine art printer that you would pick a rag paper over a glossy paper or over a luster paper. So the profiles that you get are intended to make sure that the colors are accurate. They don't necessarily address sharpening, because sharpening is typically a function of how big the photo is going to be. You take a file that, if we take this, for example, this mailbox photo we've been working with, if I print this as a 5x7 and a 16x20, those two photos require different levels of sharpening. The 16x20 requires more sharpening than the 5x7 does. So sharpening and color profiles are slightly related, but they're not exactly the same thing.
That makes sense.
All right, so once we figure out where it's going and whether we're going to use the sharpening output at all, we select our settings. I'm sorry. Okay. The next box down, I'll collapse everything, is metadata. And this goes back to all that metadata that's embedded in your photos. And remember, the metadata, the exposure data, if you used a GPS chip, the location of the photo, all that information is embedded in the photograph. Now, the IPTC data that we created may or may not be in the photograph because, for example, Canon cameras for a long time did not give you the ability to embed your name, address, and copyright information in the files when you photograph them. Nikons have been doing that for a very long time. Okay. Some of the newer Canons allow you to create a profile and embed it in the camera so that that IPTC data is what they call it, is actually embedded in the original RAW file. So when you go to export your files, you have the ability to have no metadata attached to them at all, or control what metadata that you want to have. So for example, you can tell it to remove personal information, location information, and write keywords as a hierarchy simply by checking those boxes. All right. In the drop-down, you have the option to include just your copyright data, which is typically what a lot of professional photographers do when they post stuff online. If you post a photo online, you have got to be emotionally prepared that it will be downloaded and stolen by somebody. There's no way to prevent it. If you put it online, it's going to get stolen, period. So one of the things that you can do is you can opt to embed the copyright information and strip all of the exposure data out of the resulting file. So for example, if your camera had a GPS enabled chip in it and you were shooting and the location that you were shooting at, you did not want to share, you would want to strip all that information out and not tell people. Okay? So you could click copyright only or copyright and contact info only, in which case the only metadata that will be written to the new file will be the copyright info, which says, hey, this photo is mine, and hey, this photo is mine, and this is how you can get in touch with me to license it. All right, so then you can see the other options that you've got. And so depending on what you're doing and what the purpose of the photo is, you can elect to have all the metadata or just your copyright information. All right, so typically, most of our stuff, when we export it, we leave just the copyright data. All right, so that's pretty straightforward. Any questions on that? If you're exporting stuff to send to the lab, it doesn't matter because they're not going to do anything with it. It's typically that's more important if you're going to give the photo to somebody else, like for a contest, or if you're going to post it online somewhere. All right, watermarking. So does everybody know what I mean when I say watermarking a photograph? Anybody not familiar with the expression? Okay, so Lightroom has the ability to add watermarks to a photo. So we're going to go into the watermark tool. And the reason that there's tons of watermarks here is these are all presets. Typically, when you get to this box, there will probably just be like a standard one. When you click there in the edit, when you click the drop down on watermark, what are the choices that you have?
Simple, copyright watermark, edit watermarks.
Okay, so that's what you get for free with the program. So if you want to put in like regular watermarks on the photo, you have to pretty much do it yourself. And so this is how you do it. What you're going to do is under watermark, you're going to go down to edit watermarks, and that will pop up a dialog box that will include your photo. You can resize it if you want. So I'm going to make this bigger so it's easier to see what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm trying to get to a good spot here. I can't back up. At any rate, so what's going to happen is I have a preset, okay, and we have a studio logo, and I have one called black lower right 20%. So if I click that preset, my logo shows up down here in the lower right hand corner. So you have the option to create graphical logos, which is what this is. This GutierrezPhotography.com is a PNG with a transparent background, so that as I move it over the photo, any place where the text isn't, you can see the photo. All right. If you don't have a graphical one yet, you can always just put your name on it. And a lot of people do that. And creating a PNG is not a big deal if you have Photoshop. It's actually pretty easy to do. It's just a format that you save. So what I'm going to do is show you how to do a watermark and not use a PNG. But if you do have a PNG, all you do is you come up here to the image options and you click choose, navigate to wherever you saved your watermark, and then it'll be added to the library. And then you can put it wherever you want it. All right. But I'm going to go, instead of with the graphic one, I'm going to go with the text one. All right. So what happens is that the text that now appears is whatever I type down in the box down here. Okay, so as you can see in the box in the lower left corner, it has the copyright symbol and my name, and then that information appears right now in the lower right-hand corner of the photograph. Okay, I can change the font of it. Go ahead.
I missed how you made that box down there, sorry.
All right, so up at the top where it says watermark style,
Okay.
make sure you click text.
Okay. Got it.
And then you should see, what does it say in your boxes by default?
I don't have mine up. I'm just taking notes on yours because I was too slow to find it. So I was watching you do it.
Okay. Somebody else who has theirs up that hasn't created a watermark.
It just says copyright, but how do you get the little C that you made before your name?
It's I copied it from Microsoft Word.
Is it 961?
Is it 961 is the code for it?
Is it 691?
If you type in 691 right there, it'll do it.
I'm not sure where to type it, but
Open your window. You close it.
You have Microsoft Word there?
Yeah, I do.
Well, what you can do is go into Word and create the symbol and then copy and paste it. That's how I got it in.
Okay.
All right, so some of you, in fact, may have the copyright symbol already included in the watermark that's there. All right, so at any rate, you would type your name. You can change up here under text options, you can change the font. So I don't like this font, I think it's horrible. So I'm going to go up and pick Century Gothic because I like that one a lot better. It's cleaner. And I'm going to change it. I think the white is not good, so I'm going to change the color to black. So now I've got black, okay? And it's got a drop shadow on it right now. And I don't like the drop shadow, so I'm going to pull the opacity of the shadow back to 0. If I leave the opacity up and I play with these sliders, I can move the offset of the shadow, okay? And you can play with those to see what it does. All right. But I'm going to set the opacity to 0 because I don't want a drop shadow. All right. So next what we're going to do is I'm going to come down to effects. And the opacity slider for the watermark controls whether you see it at all. If I set the opacity to 0, the watermark disappears. If I put it up to 100, it's at full opacity, which means we can see it. So I can drop the opacity down so it's semi-transparent, okay? If I don't like how big it is, I've got a couple options. The proportional slider changes its size. And all I do is slide the proportional slider until I get it where I want it. I can click fit. I can click fill. Okay, I don't like what they do, so I'm going to go back to proportional, and I'm going to leave the watermark there at that size. So the next box down is it says, where is the anchor point? So I currently, if you look, there's 9 little circles there, and currently the lower right-hand circle is selected. If I pick the upper left-hand circle, it's going to move the watermark up to that part of the photo. Or I could put it smack dab in the middle of the photo if I wanted to. And then I could increase the size of it so that it covers the whole screen, then lower the opacity so that you can see through it, but it's still in the middle of the photo. A lot of photographers do stuff like this. Okay, I don't like to, so I'm going to put the opacity back up. I'm going to drop the proportional of it down, make it small, and I'm going to stick it back in the lower right-hand corner because for this one, that's where I like it. I'm actually going to make it a little bit smaller. Yeah. All right, so once you create a watermark like this with all these settings, when you go save, if it's a new set of settings, it's going to ask you to give this a preset, to make it a preset and give it a name. So I'm going to call this class 100, just because I like the way it sounds. So then I go create, all right? And so now when it'll drop us back into the export dialog, and it tells me that I'm using the class 100 preset, which is going to be in the lower right-hand corner. It's going to be black. It's going to be my name with the copyright in Century Gothic font at a proportional sizing of about 16, right? There are companies that are now making a bunch of money turning your signature into watermarks that you can import into Lightroom and add to your photos. Whether you watermark or not a photo is another item of debate among photographers. Some folks say that watermarking your photos ruins them, and it's not going to stop people from stealing them anyways, so you shouldn't bother. We watermark photos because we consider it an advertising, an advertisement. So somebody goes, that photo's fantastic. And then they say, well, who did it? And so that logo of ours is actually our email address, or it's our website address.
So when you show your clients like their gallery of pictures, then they wouldn't have your watermark on them?
Well, what we do is normally, in normal times, we do what are called in-person sales. So we bring people into the studio, have them sit down on the couch and look at big, ginormous versions of their photos because we want them to buy big, ginormous prints.
There you go.
All right. Whenever, on those occasions when we put up a gallery for people to look at, what we do is we heavily watermark the photo so that if they wind up copying it, which they can do because people have done it, and you've probably seen it where you've gone to somebody's Facebook page and they'll have a photo up that says proof across it. That's what they did, is they took a copy of a photo off of a proof page. This Mogrify plugin that we've got, the reason that we've got it, what it allows us to do is, in addition to a watermark, we can put other watermarks on the photo. So we have a preset that puts proof in giant letters across the middle of the photo, but they're mostly transparent. And then across the top, it says, do not copy or post. And then across the bottom, it's got the file number for the photograph. And normally when we put up an online gallery, that's how we watermark the photos. And that's why we paid the $15 to have Mogrify available, because it allows us to put 3 lines of watermarks on a single photo. Okay. So,
Okay, Marco,
yes.
how do you delete your presets if you've accumulated a ton of presets for these watermarks?
You have to just go in and delete them one at a time inside the watermark editor.
So do you just like right click on one or something? I've never been able to figure out how to clean that mess up that I've got.
Give me a sec. I'll get back.
Looks like a crazy person got a hold of my watermark section.
They're at my place too.
Okay, so I've got this on my drop down. You can see I've got black ML selected.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Which stands for black text, middle of the photo on the left side.
Okay.
Right? Let's say I don't want to keep that one. What I do with that one selected, and you see there's a check mark on it.
Mm-hmm.
I go down to the bottom of the box. It says delete preset black ML.
Well, mine doesn't have that option.
Where? Okay, do me a favor. Go ahead and share your screen. Let me stop sharing here.
Oh boy, this is going to be embarrassing. I've got a little bit of a train.
Under the bus earlier, just saying.
I've got a train wreck going on with that.
Okay, so go into the export window.
I need to move this down. All right, give me a sec. The little thing's going round and round. There we go. No. Okay, so if I go to edit, whoops, found it.
Okay, you were there. Click on Edit Watermarks. And you drop down at the upper left corner where it says white 10 best position. Click that.
I see, thank you.
Bottom, it says delete preset.
Okay, Nita's gonna get out her little delete key today and clean this mess up. Okay, thank you.
I will share that with the media later. So.
That has been bugging me for a long time.
All right, so go ahead and unshare.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. All right, so we're back in I'm going to pick the class 100. Okay. All right, so we're done with the watermarking, and the last box to look at is post-processing. And this is anything else that you want done to the photo after the processing is complete. And these are your choices, okay? You can do nothing, which is what we've got. When we export stuff, it goes to the file and we're good. You can tell it, and we'll see a slight difference between Macs and PCs here, but the next item down underneath do nothing should be either show in Explorer or show in Finder. In which case what will happen is that once the export is complete, whether it's 1 photo or 1,000 photos, once it's complete, the software will open up the folder in either Finder or Windows Explorer where you told it to put them. Some people do this in case they chose poorly and they want to move stuff, or they just want to make sure they didn't get it wrong. You can opt to open these items in another application, like Photoshop or something else. Okay. And that might be is that if something that you're doing is a predecessor step for something you do in another program. For example, one of the ways that you can use AI Focus from Topaz, which is a program that Anita has, is you can use it as a standalone sharpening application. I mean, AI Sharpen. And so you could export a final file from here directly into the Topaz program to run another level of sharpening on it. You could run it into any other program. If there's something that you're going to do in another software application, immediately after you export this photo, you can tell Lightroom to send it there and then open that application. Okay. We almost never do this. I think in 14 years, I've done this once or twice. I typically leave it at do nothing, because that's the kind of guy I am. I'm a do nothing kind of guy. All right. So at this point now, we have all these settings. So I'm going to expand all the pertinent windows. And I'm going to review what I've done real quick.
One quick question before you go away on the post-processing. What is the choice go to export actions folder now? What is that all about?
It's it's kind of involved.
Don't bother.
Oh, okay.
What if you don't have that post-processing carrot?
You don't have it?
No,
You don't have a Mac.
I have
Neither.
a PC and I've got it. So
Okay.
the very bottom of your export dialog box, you don't have post-processing?
no,
Under watermark.
nope. That's okay, because I'm not going to use it anyway. So there.
Okay, all right. Well, you taught me a lesson I'll never forget. Okay, so I'm going to review real quickly what I've selected for this photo. I'm going to put it in the same folder where the original is located, but I'm going to put it in a subfolder, and that subfolder is called Export JPEGs. All right. I am not going to rename the file. I'm just going to use the original file name with JPEG appended to it because it's a JPEG file. It's not a video, so it doesn't matter. It's going to be a JPEG format in sRGB. The resolution is at 60. Oops, and we were playing with this and I never set it back. I'm going to set the long edge to 1200 because this photo is going to go on this photo is going to go on Facebook, right? So I'm going to export it at 1200 pixels on the long edge. Because it's going on Facebook, I'm going to sharpen for screen at the standard setting. I'm going to include my copyright and my contact info in the photo. I'm going to use the class 100 watermark that I just created, and I'm not going to do any post-processing. So now all I have to do is hit done. And what I'll get is it'll drop back to the main screen. And if the export process takes more than just a moment, you'll get a progress bar show up right here underneath where it says Lightroom Classic. Typically, if you're doing one photo and it's pretty small, it'll go really fast. If you're exporting like 1,000 photos, like we did the other day, it could take 15 or 20 minutes, and you get a long progress bar. So what I'm going to do here real quickly is I'm going to navigate to where I put that photo. So give me a sec because my program is not cooperating. All right. Okay, so I'm going to have to unshare that so you can see where we are. So I'm going to share this screen. Okay. So, all right. So this is on a PC. This is what the PC version of Finder looks like. All right. And so my photo, the original photo is located in class photo folder number 1. And it's this raw file right here, _MG_2385. That's the original file number. And I told Lightroom to put the new version in the same location, but in a subfolder called Export JPEGs. And so when I click there, there's one photo in there. And it's _MG_2385, but JPG. And if I double click on it and open it up, give it a sec. Okay, what we can see now is that, oh, I never saved that preset. So it used the original preset that I had. Okay, and this is why you check things. So this is what it did. It applied all those changes. It added in the watermark and created a new file called blah, 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 JPEG. And the original file is right here, untouched and unscathed, looking like it did when I imported it from the camera. Okay, that's the way exports work. And depending on your needs, you can fine tune this in lots and lots of ways. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing that because what I wanna show you here real quickly is how you manage your presets and why it's useful. Okay. So I come over here and I right click on a photo, and when I hover over export, this dialog that pops up where the word export is at the top, what's listed below that are presets. Any presets in the catalog show up here. And as you can see, because we've been doing this for 15 years, we have a ton of presets. And they're for different things. Now we need to go through and winnow this down because there's a couple we don't use anymore. But if I come up here and get back into the export dialog box, all of those presets show up in the preset panel. So these presets here were the standard ones that came with my version of Lightroom. These user presets, and when I click on this, it's a big group. These are all the presets that we've created. So the way that you create a preset is I'm going to use all the settings that I just exported the last photo with. And one of the things about the export dialog is that if you change a bunch of settings and then export, the Lightroom dialog box holds on to those settings until you change them. Okay? So everything that I just used to export that mailbox photo are still set. So I'm going to come over here to add down at the bottom of the preset window and click on it, and it's going to open up a dialog box, and it looks just like anything else. So I'm going to call this, the preset name, I'm going to call it mailboxes. But I don't want to put it in with my users, so I'm going to come down to the folder, and I'm going to say new folder, and I'm going to say class example, and then create. It'll create a class example folder, and now I can create the preset, which is inside of it. Okay? So if I come and pick another preset, a bunch of things change. I'll click that one. I'll click that one. If I want to go back and export another photo using those same presets, all I have to do is click the preset. It resets all the settings, and then all I'd have to do is click the export button. Okay, but, okay, I'm going to cancel out of here. That's where this short dialog box comes in handy. When I come up here and hover on export, what I get are all of my presets. And in fact, that preset that I just created is now right here. So I don't even have to go into the dialog box now to export. If I know that I want to use that same preset, all I have to do is come here and click on mailboxes and I'm good. So one of the ways that we use this is that if you see down here in our presets, we have print 8 by 12, print 12 by 18, print 8 by 10, and print 5 by 7. And all of these have different settings for the long edge of the file. So just because I've been using it for years, if I go in here to the print 5 by 7, I'm going to see that the long edge will be 2100 pixels because that's 7 times 300. If I come down here to the print 8 by 10, the long edge is going to be at 3000 because 10 by 300 is 3000. So what we're able to do is if we're exporting a bunch of files for clients, instead of going into the dialog box and setting stuff, we just pick everything that's going out as an 8 by 10, come over here and click print 8 by 10. And what all of these actions have in common, these print actions, is they send the resulting JPEGs to the same place, which is a subfolder called printing. So they create different size files, but they put them all in the same place. So if you find that you routinely export the same way, it makes sense to create a preset and then you can get at it from this quick pop-up.
What is export with previous?
Okay, that's why what I said about Lightroom holds on to your last settings. Let's say that you didn't have a preset and you had monkeyed around with a photo and you liked what you got, and you didn't create a preset and you hit export. And then you wanted to export another one using the same settings. You would just hit export with previous and it uses the previous settings from your last export to export. It's kind of a whatever you did last preset.
Can you click on print 12 by 18 and show us where that takes you?
Sure. So I have to go up to see it. I've got to go up into the presets. So I'll go into my user presets. And you said 12 by 18?
No, go back to that screen you were on before.
It doesn't take you anywhere.
Huh?
Here, hold on. If I say hit that button, okay.
Hit export and then go over to the words print 12 by 18. Where does that take you if you click that?
If I click that, it just, what you can see now in the upper right-hand corner is the export progress window. It just starts.
And where's it putting it?
Where it put it is, well, let me see, I'll stop sharing.
Do you have a special file on your D drive or something for that?
I'll show you exactly where it put it, because you have to understand where it's going.
Somebody always told me, know where you're putting your files, Anita.
Yep, and I do, because it's because you cut me off before I got to the point about explaining how it worked. We're skipping a step, okay?
Sorry.
So if we come back here now, it didn't take, hold on. Give me a sec.
Can I ask you a question while you're doing that?
Sure.
Why would you not just go back into your library mode and push the export button instead of the drop down window, whatever you're doing?
It's just a different way to get there.
Okay.
It takes you eventually to the same place. Okay, so the way that preset is set up is that the location, the destination of where that particular preset works, all of those print presets, the way that they work is that they create a folder called printing as a subfolder where the original file is located. Okay, and inside there now is, and it renames the file. Okay, so what it does is it uses the original file name and then adds 8 by 12 behind it. So we know that this is the 8 by 12 version in the event that we, let's say, exported a a 12 by 18 or a 5 by 7, there would be multiple copies in there, each with the appropriately sized file, right? So, and all right, so I'm going to stop sharing this and I'll show you in the preset, because you can't see it when you click that quick menu. So with the 8 by 12 preset, what you can see is that it's same folder as the original photo in a subfolder called printing, and it renames the file by adding this 8 by 12 on the end of it.
We
Can't
see
see your
nothing.
screen.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so this is what the export controls look like for that preset. Again, going back to the top, same folder as the original in a subfolder called printing. Rename the folder to add 8 by 12 on the end. It's a JPEG in Adobe RGB format because it's going to the lab. The quality is 100. The long edge is 3600 because this is the 8 by 12 one. It's going on glossy paper at standard with our copyright information only in it. And if I switch to the 8 by 10 one, everything's the same except the long edge value changes. If I go to 5 by 7, it changes to 2100 down here. Keep moving on me. All right. So all of these 5, 6 presets are identical. The only difference is the value in this box and the number we put up here. Because that way, this one tells us that it's going to be a 5 by 7 copy at 2100. So if I export this now, what happens is that back over in my file, there's now a second one that's got the same file name, but it says 5 by 7. And what I'm going to do is show you the dimensions on these two files are different. The dimensions on the 5 by 7 are 2100 by 1400. The dimensions on the 8 by 12 are 3600 by 2400. That's how many pixels are in the photo, rows and columns. And so the files are very different sizes. They'll both print at 300 pixels per inch, but the sizes of the files, both in pixels and in kilobytes, is very, very different. And that's one of the reasons we do it this way, is we send in a file just big enough to be exactly the right size to print at 300 pixels per inch, which is high res. All right, so when we go back into the export dialog box, you can manage your presets the same way we manage presets everywhere else, is that if I want to make a change to a preset, so I'm going to come up here to the one I did earlier, the class 100. I'm going to click on this mailboxes one, and I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to change the watermark to something else. I'm just going to pick one of my watermark presets, and I'm going to change, just because I'm monkeying with it, I'm going to change the pixels to 2000 and quality 100. Let's say I'm entering a contest and they had very particular requirements and this meets them. All right, but I don't want to create a new preset. I just want to update this one, the mailboxes one. So right now, if I hit export, it'll export with these settings, but the preset won't be changed. So to change the preset, I would hover over the preset and right click and then say update with current settings. And now that mailboxes preset has been changed with the most recent changes on it. If I want to delete a preset, like I'll get rid of this DA Marco personal one, I would hover over it, right click, and then just say delete. And then it eventually goes away. And that fundy one, I'm gonna get rid of that because that's one we're not using either. LinkedIn profile, we're gonna know Becky needs that for work. The wallet one, the 3Best, we'll get rid of that one too. One other thing that you can do, and this is a new feature, the two of you running Lightroom 6 won't have this ability, is some of you might notice that next to the presets there are boxes. Lorelei and Don, you probably don't see that because that's a new feature. Ginger, does yours show the boxes?
I'll have to look. I closed it while I was listening.
Okay. This is a fairly recent update, and if you haven't updated in a year, you may or may not see these.
Okay.
But let's say, for example, I've got a bunch of photos, and I'm going to print them as both 12 by 18s and 8 by 12s. Okay, because those are the same shape, so the crop will work for both of them. If I check those and then hit the export, it will export, it'll run both export presets. So this would generate two versions of the photo of each photo that I'm exporting at the same time. This was something that photographers have been asking for since Lightroom was first built, was the ability to execute multiple presets simultaneously. For most of us, even we in the studio don't use it. It's not that handy, but it's a new feature. Okay. So where we are right now is that we've covered in detail most of the features from the library module and the develop module in Lightroom. We didn't talk about absolutely everything that they'll do. For most of the other features, start to get really specific, niche-y type kind of things. Or they're features that help automate functions that you do a lot. And for folks that are just getting started in Lightroom, going any deeper into most of those is overkill at this point. When you start working in the software a lot, there we go. Once you start working in the software a lot, and you get to a point where there might be a better way to do this, you can start Googling how to do stuff. And what you're going to find out is that most, not all, but most of these other tools and features that we didn't cover rely on understanding how the basic tools actually function. And we did cover all of the basic and most of the moderately advanced tools as well in these two modules. Like I said, in the map, book, print, and web modules, we have not found useful. And there are peculiarities to exporting with those. When we export stuff for the web, we know the sizes that we need. And so we export them at those sizes, and then we load them into our web page where we need them, or we put them on Facebook. And so the publisher function, that's available in the library module, and the print and web modules, we have not had any use for. If you get into printing yourself in a big way at home, like with a high-end printer or something, then you may want to spend some time in the print module because it can offer some features for image layouts on paper that can save time and trim it when you're printing at home. But if you're not printing yourself, the print module actually isn't very useful. The vast majority of people that use Lightroom that are not printing for themselves export their files to a particular place and then either electronically upload them to a print lab, and Costco allows you to do that, as does MPix and Shutterfly and Snapfish and a bunch of others. from either Finder or Windows Explorer. If we had had time, I would have covered, it talked about the slideshow a little bit. It's a fun feature if you're, it's mostly useful for if you're putting on a presentation somewhere. And so, for example, once a year we have a big thing that we do here in the studio, and we set up one of the laptops to run a looping slideshow. We create a collection. We tell the slideshow application to just run the selection continuously till we tell it to stop, and it shows the photos for 3 seconds for each photo and then goes to the next one. As a slideshow application, it is okay. People that need a real serious slideshow application, like we do, that is something we do in another application, in another function. Because there are some controls, but they're kind of clunky and they're not really super flexible. Those of you that took my basic photography class, that portion of the class where we reviewed the photos, that was done in the slideshow mode in Lightroom. It was a special setup that I had, and it worked well for that, but it's as a slideshow tool for sharing your photos, it's not really a great tool. It's an okay tool. So it is 1 o'clock right now. Before we wrap up, are there any questions about anything that we thought we were going to cover and we didn't, or anything that we covered that you think I kind of skimmed over it or made stuff up?
I have a question.
Okay.
On the export module, if we wanted to set up a preset for the bear paw requirements at 4 MGs,
Right.
We would set limit file size to 4,000. And then for image sizing, do you check that at all?
Let me go back. I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
The only reason I'm asking is because Chuck and I work with that Olay group, and we might be able to, if we could offer them a preset, expedite, their ability to submit photos with greater ease. Thought maybe we could establish that here and now, and Chuck and I could help them. Chuck, you're muted.
Hold on just a second.
I noticed that. It's rare that I'm muted. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Okay, so what you have to understand is that the answer is yes, okay? But you need to understand the implications of what can potentially happen. So if you're setting up a preset for photos to be submitted like the bear paw, where we said there's a 4,000K limit, which is actually pretty big. But what you would do is you would come up here, you would click on the limit size, and we would set it to 4,000, which is the file size. Mm-hmm. So what this is, it's an adjustment. It's a in case of adjustment. So if you were to come down here and say that you wanted to submit your photograph, we'll go with dimensions, okay? And you wanted your photo to be 4,000 pixels by 3,000 pixels. Okay, I'm just making some numbers up. Okay, so what'll happen is if you tell the thing to limit the file size, the application will make your file 4,000 by 3,000. Okay, but it's going to do whatever it needs to do to keep the kilobyte size under 4,000. So what that means is that you notice how once you click the limit file size, the quality button goes gray. So the software will make your file 4,000 by 3,000, but it will lower the quality if it needs to keep the resulting file under 4,000K.
So file settings override, in this case, file settings overrides image sizing.
It doesn't override it. What it's overriding is the quality setting.
Okay, all right, yeah, right.
because it's going to keep it at the pixels that you set, but the limitation now that you've put on it is I want it to be this big in pixels. So its only latitude to fix it now would be to lower the quality to keep it under 4,000. So the short answer is, yeah, you can build a preset and you can tell it to automatically limit the file size. But the catch is the way it's going to do it is it'll keep the pixel dimensions that you specify and lower the quality to keep it under the 4,000K cap.
Question.
Okay.
How do you know what your image sizing is going to be? You said we'll just pull out 4,000 by 3,000. I wouldn't know what numbers to put there if I was limiting my file settings to 4,000K. I wouldn't know what to do in the next box.
Well, the thing is, I'm not sure, but I think in the bear paw rules is that we gave a pixel limit for the long edge of the photo.
Okay. I'll check that and then maybe come up with something that our group, that Don and Chuck and I belong to with Olay, we could offer them a preset. That would be helpful. And the easier it is, the more photos we get for the competition, which will be good too.
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? Anything that you think we should have covered that we didn't?
Can we come back when we get stuck somewhere?
Absolutely. If you get stuck, it's just like any of my other classes you've taken. Once a student, always a student. So if you get stuck or you're working on something and it's not making sense, give me a call. And we can always use Zoom to share screens and figure out what's going on. As I get them done, we are going to put the videos from each of these class sessions online so that you can look at them and download them if you want to have them. And they'll be edited so that all of the awkward dead space or 10 minutes of us taking a break is not in the middle of it. So
Online where? Like there'll be a link to it, or?
yeah, I'll send you all a link where you can go and find them and then download them. We're going to put them on our webpage.
Okay.
That's awesome. Thank you already.
Yeah.
I was wondering if when we're done, I could ask you a couple questions about the my Bambinos thing, just because I don't know the rules about being a photographer yet.
Sure, not a problem.
Are you looking to do a not Photoshop, the other one, not Lightroom, Photoshop class?
Photoshop. I'm always looking to do a class. I've got like, I think 3 people on my wait list right now. I typically like to have at least 4.
Okay.
A
And that
Photoshop class. Hey, that would be good. Sign me up.
complex, right? Because it's math, like layering and stuff, correct?
Masking?
Yeah.
Or...
Layering, Photoshop, don't you have to layer photos in order to get different effects?
You don't have to, but it's the best way to get there.
Okay. And
The
you say
real-
if we have this Lightroom, we have Photoshop somewhere in here?
If you got the subscription,
I do.
you have access to it. You may not have downloaded it already, but you can. If you're paying the $10 a month, you can download it and you can have it.
Okay, so I'll have to do that because I don't have it.
So here's the thing about, and this is probably a good way to end this class, is talking about, do you stay in Lightroom or do you get Photoshop? And the way that you answer that question is, if you're able to get all of the things done to your photographs that you want in Lightroom, then stay out of Photoshop. Okay? There's no point to add more work just to add more work. If, on the other hand, if you've used all the tools that you can get your hands on in Lightroom and you still can't get where you want in Lightroom, then it's time to consider moving into Photoshop. So like I mentioned the other day, retouching acne on high school age kids. You can do it in Lightroom, but it's super clunky. It's really slow. It's way faster, way simpler, and you have multiple tools available in Photoshop to do the same task. So the way that we work is we do about 70% of the editing on a photo of a high school kid, this is typical, in Lightroom. And then when we get to the point where we want to do stuff like get rid of lint, dog hair, bird poop, unattractive flyaway hairs, and acne. We go into Photoshop to do that because the tools are easier, faster, and better for that. Typically, when I do my landscape photos, I do very little Photoshop work on anything I do that's landscape-wise. I do 95% of my work in Lightroom now, because Lightroom's has gotten a lot better over the years. So that's the thing and that's the question. If you can't get to where you want to go with your photos in Lightroom, then it's time to consider using Photoshop. Otherwise, if you can get everything done you need in Lightroom, I wouldn't go into Photoshop. Because as clunky as Lightroom might seem to use, Lightroom is incredibly user-friendly compared to Photoshop.
Let's see.
Anybody else?
When people take like 2 photos and merge them, that's in Photoshop, right?
Yep, you can't do that in Lightroom yet.
Okay.
Do you call that merging or stacking?
Well, yes, because it's both. In Photoshop, you can
Is it
stack photos.
interchangeable?
Well, they're different techniques, but you can do them both in Photoshop.
Okay.
Okay.
Did anybody see the photo of the girl on fire that we posted a while back?
Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, that's 13 photographs.
Oh, I can imagine. I was wondering about the process to that. I'd be interested. Like, oh my gosh.
It's
But that's
one photograph's the girl, one photograph. There are 5 photographs for the fire. There's another photograph to get rid of the framework that held the dress that we actually set on fire in place. Then there's another one where we replaced the snow on the ground so that it reflected the light from the fire. Okay, and so that is a composite where we're merging multiple photos together. That's one way to that's something you can't do in Lightroom. So.
Cool. That's awesome.
Any other questions?
So you have 3 people on your list for Photoshop and all you need is a 4th one?
I think I'll have to pull the list up and it's not on this computer. So, But if you're interested in taking the Photoshop, shoot me an email.
I might be one of the people on your list, but I'll shoot you
You
an
got
email
over
to-
your layer phobia?
Yes,
Another phobia.
in a big way.
That's another reason, and I'm going to pick on Anita again. Today's beat up on Anita Day. It's
Okay, I'm good for that.
okay.
I'm happy.
So Anita had purchased several packages, photo developing packages that work with Lightroom. They're from a company called Topaz, and they're not the only company that makes them. And these are programs that do things like sharpen the image, reduce noise. There's a whole suite of tools that Topaz offers, and there are other companies that have similar packages. And so what Anita can do is she can work on a photo in Lightroom and then export it from Lightroom into Topaz noise. I think it's called AI noise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Denoise.
Denoise. Okay. So she can export the photo into denoise, and what it'll do is it will create a version of the photo and do its magic and get rid of all the digital noise, and then it creates a new copy of the photo and dumps it back into her catalog. So now she's got two versions of the photo, the original raw file and now a TIFF file that's been denoised. Then she can take that TIFF file and open it in one of the other applications from Topaz, like Sharpen, and do her sharpening in AI Sharpen. And then when she's done, it dumps another TIFF into her catalog that's now been sharpened. So now she's got 3 copies of the photo, the original raw file, the denoised file, and then the denoised and sharpened file. Okay, so what's starting to happen is she's building up a bunch of versions of the same photo. And TIFFs, by the way, are really, really big. They're much larger than the original raw files. So what we were able to do is that these applications that Anita runs, and most of them are like this, not all, but most of them, will also run as a layer filter inside of Photoshop. So what we did was we went through Anita's stuff, and instead of opening the file in 3 or 4 different versions of these Topaz tools and getting a new TIFF file each time, what we did was we opened it up in Photoshop and then ran these very, very exact same applications as filters inside of Photoshop. And now what happened is we created a layer for each of these applications that are inside a single PSD.
It's so much more efficient, and I was so scared doing it because over the years I've gotten phobic about the word layer, and I hear people talk about layer, and flattening the layers. I'm like, no. And Marco said, we can do this more efficiently, Anita. And I said, it reminded me, I had a flashback when I was like 10 years old and we were at Disneyland, and my dad said, you will like the Matterhorn bobsled. Get on this ride with the rest of the family. No, Dad, no. Can I just watch from down here? No, you'll like it. That's what the flashback I got in my head. And Marco's going, you will really like it if we do it this way. And I thought, no. And he gave me that quarter and I got on the ride for Photoshop. And now I'm so happy that I learned how to do that.
So if you are running plug-in applications, and that's another thing that we didn't talk about in the class, was these plug-in modules. And there are lots of them out there and they do lots of different things. Is if you're running a bunch of them like Anita was, that is a function that can potentially be more efficient, more streamlined, and more controllable if you do it inside of Photoshop. Any other questions?
I just have a conceptual question from what you said. Does that, by taking the standalone programs and having them be filters inside Photoshop, does that yield more consistency and you don't have to repeat steps that you would do if you were running each of the separate programs?
The consistency, what it will do is it will streamline the amount of work that you've got to do, because you don't have to keep going back and forth and wait for the application to dump stuff and then open a new file. What it does is it keeps clutter out of your catalog. It keeps clutter off your hard drive. It puts all of the work in one place, and the tools work exactly the same way. Because when you open, like, I'll pick on the AI denoise, or the Topaz denoise. When Anita opens it from Lightroom, it opens up the Topaz denoise panel, okay, and it had a bunch of controls on it. And when I had her open Lightroom or Photoshop, and we opened from the filters menu as a filter, we opened the denoise. The control panel was, wait for it, exactly the same. There's no difference in how it works. It's just where it's working and where the results from it go. And then you have some latitude with it in Photoshop that you don't in Lightroom. So for example, Anita ran the denoise thing. And then I told her to run it again and crank all the settings way up into Stupidville, okay? And so what happened was it created a real stylized effect that was nice for part of the image and not part of the other. And now that that filter is on a layer inside of Photoshop on top of the original, you can increase or decrease the opacity, or you can mask it to completely hide the effect on part of the image and not part of the others, which is something you can't do in that same process in Lightroom.
Got it. Sounds really exciting.
Okay, so let's go around the room. Don, anything?
No, I think I'm good. I just got to get the time to start working on this.
Okay, don't let the day job get in the way of photography.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay, Lorelei, how about you?
I just need to practice and probably buy or get or subscribe, however that works. So which one would you suggest? Buy and upgrade it, or just subscribe?
You can't buy and upgrade anymore. You've got the most version, the most recent standalone version there is.
Oh, that's right.
Upgrade is get the subscription now.
So just subscription. Man, that stinks.
Yeah, I don't like it either, but it's what we're living with. So.
Well, I guess no choice there.
Okay, Ginger.
Nope, just practice and I'll update my software,
Okay.
my program, but thank you. And I'll let you know if I run into anything.
Okay. Anita?
I'm set. This was great, Marco. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Chuck, you got any last questions, comments?
No, my comments are all positive. I was in the classic situation of self-taught and discontiguous piece of information that didn't flow together. Now they do, and I know what I want to do and not do. And and I've solved the catalog question. I have a very clear path on how that's going to go. So yeah, many thank yous.
Okay. All right. And Tina, you're going to stick around afterwards, but any last comments that might be useful to the group or questions?
No, I'm just thankful. It was good.
Okay.
Thanks for
Are you, when your staff person edits the videos, is she going to edit out all the mean things you said to me?
No. And in fact, I told her to put like a blinking thing around it.
So we don't miss it.
She can put stickers. They can put stickers like thumbs down,
Oh,
thumbs
there we
out,
go.
like that.
All right. Well, everybody enjoy the rest of your day. If you've got any questions, remember, feel free, text, call, or email.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
That's
you.
good. Thank you
care.
so much. Bye,
you.
everybody.
Bye.